Hello friends. Welcome to the DXD Tales. How are you all? So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Issei was the Sage of Shadows who common. Dead the Forgotten Arts Issei x Rias Gremory x Serafall Leviathan. Also be sure to subscribe and like this video. Now let's begin. Chapter 1. Shadows Awaken. The dream always began the same way. Darkness, absolute and consuming. Before giving way to a landscape bathed in moonlight. Ancient stone monuments jutted from barren earth, their surfaces etched with symbols that seemed to shift when observed directly. And always, standing atop the central megalith, a figure wrapped in shadows that moved like living things. Issei Hyodo woke with a gasp, his body drenched in cold sweat despite the mild spring temperature. The digital clock beside his bed displayed 3:17 a.m. in harsh red numerals. He'd been having these dreams for weeks now, always waking at precisely the same time. Third night in a row, he muttered, pushing himself upright. Unlike his classmates who might roll over and return to sleep, Issei felt completely alert, his mind sharp despite the early hour. He moved to his desk with quiet efficiency, pulling out a leather-bound journal he'd started keeping when the dreams began. The pages contained meticulous notes, sketches of the symbols he'd seen, and patterns he'd noticed. Anyone seeing these entries would be shocked to discover they belonged to the supposedly average student. His hand moved across the page, sketching another symbol he'd seen tonight. TH. Is one resembled a crescent moon pierced by 3 vertical lines. As he drew, he noticed something odd about the shadows in his room. Rather than being cast naturally from the streetlight outside his window, they seemed to pool beneath his desk, darker and more substantial than they should be. Issei reached down cautiously, fingers extended toward the unnatural darkness. The moment before contact, the shadow rippled and dispersed, racing across the floor like spilled ink before vanishing entirely. He stared at the now normal space, pulse quickening. That was new, he whispered to the empty room. Morning found Issei walking to Kuo Academy, his uniform impeccable despite his disrupted sleep. The prestigious school had only recently become co-ed after being an all-girls institution, and most male students were still adjusting to being surrounded by the school's beautiful female population. Issei, wait up. He turned to see his friends Matsuda and Motohama rushing toward him. They are expressions animated with typical teenage enthusiasm. Did you hear? The kendo club is changing in the east building this afternoon, Matsuda announced, adjusting his glasses with nervous excitement. Motohama nodded vigorously. We've found the perfect peeping spot through a gap in the storage room wall. The two looked at Issei expectantly. This was their usual routine, planning voyeuristic ventures that typically ended in painful retribution from the skilled female athletes they spied on. I'll pass, Issei replied, his tone neutral but firm. I've got something else to take care of. His friends stared at him, momentarily dumbfounded. There was a time, not long ago, when Issei would have enthusiastically joined their misadventures. Something had changed in him recently, though either could pinpoint exactly what or when it had happened. Seriously, you're turning down a chance to see Murayama and Katase in their underwear. Matsuda sounded genuinely confused. Issei merely shrugged. Your funeral when they catch you. Again, he continued walking, leaving his bewildered friends behind. The truth was, these childish pursuits no longer interested him. The dreams had something else with them, a strange maturity and focus that felt both foreign and familiar, like remembering something long forgotten. The school day passed uneventfully until mathematics class. As the teacher worked through a complex equation on the board, Issei found himself solving it through a completely different method than what was being taught. His pencil moved across his notebook almost autonomously, using symbols and notations he couldn't recall learning. Hyodo, the teacher's voice cut through his concentration. Since you seem so engrossed in your notes, perhaps you'd like to solve this for the class. Several students snickered, expecting the supposedly average student to falter under pressure. Instead, Issei rose calmly and approached the board. Taking the chalk, he worked through the problem using the standard method rather than the unusual approach in his notes. His handwriting was precise, his movements confident. That's correct, the teacher admitted, unable to hide his surprise. Very good, Hyodo. As Issei returned to his seat, he noticed a pair of striking blue-green eyes watching him with undisguised interest. Rias Gremory, the school's most beautiful and popular student, was studying him with an intensity that might have made him uncomfortable if not for the strange calm that had settled over him in recent weeks. He met her gaze without flinching, an action that would have been unthinkable for the old Issei. Something flickered across her perfect features, surprise, perhaps, or curiosity, before she turned her attention back to the lesson. Issei's awareness of Rias Gremory extended beyond her beauty. There was something about her that registered as different in ways he couldn't articulate. Like recognizing a foreign language without understanding the words. He sensed something beneath her perfect human appearance. After classes ended, Issei declined another invitation from his friends and headed to the school library. The Bawil Ding was mostly empty this late in the day, which suited him perfectly. He'd been researching symbols similar to those in his dreams, drawn to obscure texts on ancient civilizations and forgotten mythologies. The shadows between the bookshelves seemed deeper than they should be, but he'd grown accustomed to these anomalies. What he couldn't ignore was the sensation of being watched. Pretending to browse a shelf, he cast a subtle glance toward the reading area and caught a flash of crimson hair disappearing behind a bookshelf. Rias Gremory was following him. Rather than confront her directly, Issei selected a book on Mesopotamian symbology and seated himself at a table with clear sightlines to where she was hiding. He opened the book and began reading, though his attention remained on the periphery where Rias lurked. After 15 minutes of this silent standoff, Issei spoke without looking up from his book. "You could join me if you're interested in ancient symbols, Gremory-senpai." A moment of silence followed before Rias emerged from behind the shelf, composure perfect despite being caught. She approached his table with the graceful confidence of someone unused to embarrassment. "I apologize for watching you, Hyodo-kun. That was rude of me." Her voice carried the refined tones of aristocracy, though there was genuine contrition in her words. Issei closed his book and gestured to the chair across from him. "No harm done, though I'm curious why someone like you would take an interest in someone like me." Rias sat with perfect posture, her crimson hair cascading over her shoulders like liquid fire. "Someone like you," she echoed, head tilting slightly. "And what kind of person do you think you are, Issei Hyodo?" The use of his first name wasn't lost on him, nor was the subtle challenge in her question. "Until recently, I would have said unremarkable. Lately, I'm less certain." Something in his response seemed to please her. "I've noticed changes in you these past few weeks. You've withdrawn from your usual activities. Your academic performance has improved dramatically. And there's something else about you that's different." She leaned forward slightly, something most people wouldn't notice. "And what do you see that others don't, Gremory-senpai?" Issei asked, genuinely curious about what this extraordinary girl might have perceived. Before she could answer, the library lights flickered momentarily. In that brief darkness, the shadows around Issei's feet surged upward like grasping hands before subsiding as quickly as they had appeared. Rias's eyes widened fractionally. She had seen it. "Interesting," she murmured. "Very interesting indeed." Their conversation was interrupted by the library's closing announcement. As they gathered their belongings, Rias handed him a small card embossed with an unusual symbol. "If you'd like to continue this conversation, come to the old school building tomorrow after classes. The Occult Research Club meets there." Her smile held secrets. "I think you might find it enlightening." Before Issei could respond, she was gone, leaving him holding the card and wondering what game they were playing. The symbol on the card was familiar. He'd drawn something similar in his journal after one of his dreams. That night, walking home, Issei took a shortcut through the park. The setting sun cast long shadows across the path, and the few remaining visitors were heading toward the exits. He was crossing the central fountain area when a prickling sensation at the base of his skull made him stop. "Excuse me," called a soft, feminine voice from behind him. Issei turned to see a pretty girl with long black hair wearing an unfamiliar school uniform. Her expression was shy, hands clasped nervously before her. Would you be my boyfriend?" she asked, blushing deeply. Alarm bells rang in Issei's mind. The request was bizarre enough, but something else felt wrong. The shadows around the girl were unnaturally still, as if holding their breath. And beneath her sweet appearance, he sensed something predatory. I don't even know your name, he replied carefully, maintaining a safe distance. I'm Yuma Amano, she answered, taking a step closer. I've seen you passing through this park and I've developed feelings for you. Each word felt rehearsed, hollow. The old Issei might have been flattered, even excited by the confession. The person he was becoming recognized the danger. That's very flattering, Yuma-san, but I'm afraid I must decline. He took a deliberate step backward. Perhaps we could start as friends instead. Frustration flickered across her features before her smile returned, now tinged with something cold. Of course. Friends first is sensible. Would you walk with me a little while? Friend. The sun had nearly set now, leaving the park largely deserted. Every instinct told Issei to leave, but curiosity about this strange girl and her intentions kept him rooted in place. Actually, I have something to tell you, Issei Hyodo. Her voice changed, dropping the pretense of sweetness. It's been fun playing this little game, but I have a job to do. The transformation happened in an instant. Her school uniform dissolved, replaced by scandalous black leather straps that barely covered her essential areas. More shocking were the black athered wings that erupted from her back, spreading wide in the dying light. My real name is Rainer, she announced, rising into the air. And my orders are to eliminate you before you become a problem. A spear of pinkish light materialized in her hand, its energy humming with lethal intent. Issei stood transfixed, not by fear but by the strange familiarity of the situation. Something deep within him recognized this creature, a fallen angel, and knew her kind as ancient adversaries. As she hurled the light spear toward his heart, time seemed to slow. The shadows around Issei's feet surged upward without conscious command, forming a barrier between him and the incoming weapon. The spear struck this shadow shield and hesitated, as if confused by the unexpected defense. But the protection was incomplete, unpracticed. The spear pushed through, losing momentum but still piercing Issei's chest. Pain exploded through him as he collapsed to his knees, blood pouring from the wound. Rainer descended, her expression shocked. What was that? What did you do? She leaned closer, examining him with newfound interest. It doesn't matter. You're dying anyway, but my superiors will want to know about this little trick. Through the haze of pain, Issei saw the shadows around him writhing in agitation, responding to his distress but lacking direction. As his consciousness faded, he had the strange thought that he should know how to control them better. Such a waste, Rainer sighed, spreading her wings to depart. If you'd awakened whatever power that was a little sooner, you might have survived. Goodbye, Issei Hyodo. As darkness claimed him, Issei's last thought was of the symbols in his dreams and the strange card Rias Gremory had given him. Both seemed important somehow, connected to whatever was happening to him. Then there was nothing but cold and shadows. Death, however, proved temporary. Consciousness returned gradually, awareness seeping back like water into parched soil. Issei opened his eyes to find himself in his own bedroom, morning light filtering through the curtains. For a moment, he wondered if everything had been another strange dream, the fallen angel, the light spear, his death in the park. Then he sat up and saw Rias Gremory sitting in his desk chair, watching him with those penetrating blue-green eyes. Good morning, Issei, she greeted him calmly, as if finding her in his bedroom was perfectly normal. How are you feeling? Issei's hand went to his chest where the spear had pierced him. The skin was whole, unmarked. I died, he stated, certainty in his voice. Rias nodded, neither surprised by his death nor his matter-of-fact acceptance of it. Yes, you did, rather thoroughly, I'm afraid. That fallen angel knew exactly what she was doing. But I'm alive now, technically. No, Rias stood and moved to sit on the edge of his bed. You're not human anymore, Issei. I've reincarnated you as a devil, my devil, to be precise. Rather than shock or disbelief, Issei felt a strange sense of pieces falling into place. Devils, fallen angels, these concepts should have seemed fantastic, yet they registered as known quantities in his mind. Like remembering facts from a forgotten lesson. Show me, he said simply. Rias raised an eyebrow but complied. Black bat-like wings emerged from her back, smaller and more elegant than Rainer's feathered appendages. You have them too now, she informed him. Along with enhanced strength, improved senses, and magical potential that frankly, I'm quite excited to explore. Issei closed his eyes, focusing on the new sensations in his body. He could feel the wings Rias mentioned, folded against his back on some other plane of existence. With a thought, he manifested them, the process feeling as natural as moving an arm. Impressive control for a newborn devil, Rias noted, genuine appreciation in her voice. Most take days to manage their first manifestation. Issei retracted the wings and fixed her with a steady gaze. Why did you save me? What do you want from me? Direct questions. I appreciate that. Rias smiled slightly. I saved you because you're special, Issei. I've been watching you for weeks. Ever since I sensed something awakening within you. Something ancient and powerful. The shadows, he murmured. Yes, that ability you showed against Rainer, Hunter. Aimed as it was, is unlike anything in devil magic. It's not angelic or fallen in nature either. She leaned forward, eyes intense. What do you know about it? Issei considered lying or deflecting but decided against it. This woman had saved his life, and his instincts, increasingly reliable lately, suggested she could be trusted, at least for now. I've been having dreams, ancient places, symbols, I don't recognize but somehow understand. A figure controlling shadows like they're solid things. He met her gaze directly. And lately, when I'm stressed or in danger, the shadows around me respond. Rias absorbed this information with a thoughtful expression. The timing makes sense. Your sacred gear was preparing to awaken, which might have triggered these other abilities. Sacred gear. Divine artifacts granted to humans by the biblical God. Yours is special. Very special. Which is why that fallen angel was sent to kill you before it could fully manifest. Rias stood and paced across the room. But these shadow abilities, they're something else entirely. Something older, perhaps. Issei swung his legs over the side of the bed, realizing he was wearing only boxers. Rather than embarrassment, he felt a strange detachment from such concerns. You mentioned I'm your devil now. What exactly does that mean? Rias smiled, seemingly pleased by his priorities. It means you're part of my peerage, my family. Essentially, I'm responsible for teaching you about devil society and helping you develop your powers. In return, you'll serve me in the House of Gremory. And if I refuse, instead of anger, Rias looked amused. You can't exactly go back to being human, Issei. But I don't believe in forced servitude. If you truly wished to leave my service after understanding what that means, arrangements could be made. Her expression grew serious. Though I should warn you, without protection, you'd be hunted by fallen angels and possibly others interested in your unique abilities. Issei nodded, accepting the reality of his situation. When do we start? We already have. Rias handed him his school uniform, freshly pressed. Get dressed. I'll introduce you to the others before school begins. As Rias turned to give him privacy, Issei noticed something on his desk. His journal, open to a page he didn't remember writing. The handwriting was his, but the extensive notes about shadow manipulation techniques were unfamiliar. Even stranger were the margins, filled with a script he couldn't read yet somehow understood contained warnings about the void between worlds. He dressed quickly, tucking the journal into his school bag. Whatever was happening to him, these dreams, the shadow powers, his new existence as a devil, felt like pieces of a puzzle he'd been unknowingly assembling his entire life. The Occult Research Club occupied the entire old school building, a Victorian-style structure on the edge of Kuo Academy's grounds. Inside, the decor featured rich woods, antique furniture, and occult symbols that Issei now recognized as genuine magical sigils rather than decorative elements. Rias led him into the main clubroom where 3 other students waited. Allow me to introduce my peerage, she said with evident pride. My queen, Akano Himahima. A beautiful girl with long black hair tied in a ponytail bowed slightly. Her smile was gentle, but Issei sensed something dangerous beneath her refined exterior. Era, so this is our new Kohai. How delightful. My knight, Yuto Kiba. The blonde boy who was wildly popular among the female students nodded respectfully. Welcome to the club, Hyodo-san. I look forward to training with you. And my rook, Kaneko Tuju. The smallest member of the group, a white-haired first year with an expressionless face, merely glanced at him before returning to the candy she was eating. Despite her diminutive size, Issei sensed immense physical power contained within her small frame. Everyone, this is Issei Hyodo, my new pawn. Rias concluded. Issei noted the chess terminology but filed away questions about that for later. Instead, he bowed formally to the group. Thank you for having me. I look forward to working with you all. Quote. Akeno approached, circling him with undisguised curiosity. Bushu says you have unusual abilities. Something about shadows. Before Issei could respond, Neko spoke in her characteristically flat tone. He smells strange. Not just devil, something older. Hiba looked interested. Older than devils. That's saying something. Rias clapped her hands once, regaining control of the conversation. We'll have plenty of time to explore Issei's unique qualities. For now, Akeno and I need to bring him up to speed on the basics of Devil Society and his responsibilities. As the others departed for their classes, Rias directed Issei to a comfortable sofa. She and Akeno sat opposite him, their postures suggesting this was a formal briefing. Devils serve. Ivan gained power through contracts with humans, Rias explained. Nothing so dramatic as stealing souls, those days are long past. Modern contracts involve fulfilling wishes in exchange for payment appropriate to the service. Akeno continued seamlessly. As a new devil, you'll start with simple contracts, helping with household tasks, providing companionship to lonely people, that sort of thing. I've prepared some flyers for you to distribute tonight, Rias added. When humans summon you through these, fulfill their requests to the best of your ability. Build a reputation for reliability, and you'll advance quickly. Issei absorbed this information with the same strange calm that had characterized his reaction to everything since his resurrection. I understand. What about my other abilities? The shadows, and this sacred gear you mentioned. Rias and Akeno exchanged a glance. We'll begin training this afternoon after school, Rias decided. I'm particularly interested in seeing what your sacred gear can do. As for the shadow abilities, she hesitated. I've been researching since our conversation in the library. There are ancient references to something called the void arts, or shadow manipulation. But information is scarce. Most texts claim these abilities died out thousands of years ago, Akeno added, her usual playful demeanor replaced by scholarly seriousness. The few that survived the Great War were supposedly sealed away by agreement between all three factions. Issei frowned slightly. 3 factions. Devils, angels, and fallen angels, Rias clarified. The 3 biblical powers that have been in conflict since ancient times, though we maintain an uneasy peace these days. The morning bell rang, signaling they needed to head to class. As they left the old building, Rias placed a hand on Issei's arm. One more thing, she said quietly. It might be best not to display your shadow abilities too openly until we understand them better. If they are indeed these legendary void arts, their mere existence could attract unwanted attention from powerful entities. Issei nodded, appreciating her concern. I'll be discreet. The school day passed in a blur, with Issei noticing details about his classmates he'd never perceived before. The girl who always sat by the window had a faint aura suggesting latent magical potential. The quiet boy in the back corner carried something powerful sealed within an amulet hidden under his shirt. Everywhere he looked, the veil between the mundane world and the supernatural seemed thinner, more permeable. After classes, he returned to the old school building for his promised training session. In the expansive basement level, Rias waited with Akeno and Kiba. We'll start with your sacred gear, Rias decided. Sacred gears are activated by strong emotions and clear intent. Focus on something that makes you feel powerful, determined. Issei closed his eyes, searching for the right emotional trigger. The memory of dying in the park surfaced, the helplessness, the frustration at being unable to defend himself properly. Never again, he thought fiercely. I need strength to protect myself and others. A surge of energy answered his call. His left arm tingled, then burned as a red gauntlet materialized, covering his hand and forearm. Its design was draconic, with a large green jewel embedded in the back of the hand. The boosted gear, Rias breathed, her eyes wide. One of the 13 Longinus, sacred gears powerful enough to kill gods. Issei, do you understand what this means? Before he could respond, a deep voice emerged from the gauntlet itself. Interesting partner you've found, devil girl. This one carries more than just my power. Everyone in the room tensed. The dragon is conscious already. Akeno murmured. That's unprecedented for a new wielder. Who are you? Issei asked the gauntlet directly. I am Didrag, the Red Dragon Emperor, the voice rumbled. My soul resides within the boosted gear, passed from wielder to wielder throughout history. The jewel pulsed as if considering something. But you, boy, you carry another power. Ancient, familiar somehow. Rias stepped forward eagerly. Do you recognize it, Didrag? These shadow abilities he possesses. Not precisely, but they taste of the void between realms, of power that predates even my long existence. The dragon's voice became thoughtful. I have fought alongside a wielder with similar abilities once, many centuries ago. They called him the Sage of Shadows. The title sent a jolt through Issei's mind. Like a key turning in a lock. Fragments of his dreams crystallized into sharper focus, the figure controlling shadows, standing atop the megalith. Had he been seeing this sage in his dreams? What happened to this sage? Kiba asked. He fell in the Great War, or so I believed, Didrag answered. Though legends suggested he found a way to preserve his knowledge for a worthy successor. All eyes turned to Issei. Speculation heavy in the air. Let's not jump to conclusions, Rias cautioned, though excitement colored her voice. Whether Issei is somehow connected to this sage or has independently developed similar abilities, our priority should be helping him master both the boosted gear and his shadow powers. Training proceeded methodically from there. Kiba worked with Issei on basic swordsmanship, noting his unusually quick reflexes and natural grasp of blade techniques. Akeno tutored him in the fundamentals of magical energy manipulation, commenting on his extraordinary sensitivity to power flows. Through it all, Issei found himself executing movements he'd never learned, recognizing magical principles he'd never studied. It was like his body remembered skills his mind had forgotten. As evening approached, Rias handed him a stack of flyers featuring the Gremory family crest. Distribute these in the residential district. When someone uses one to summon you, do your best to fulfill their request. Think of it as a first step in your new life as a devil. Issei nodded, tucking the flyers into his bag. What if I encounter more fallen angels? A valid concern after what happened. Rias produced a small red circle inscribed with complex sigils. This is a communication circle. If you're in danger, channel your energy into it, and I'll come immediately. The simple gesture of protection affected Issei more than he expected. In his previous life, no one had ever prioritized his safety this way. Thank you, he said quietly. For everything. Something softened in Rias's expression. You're one of mine now, Issei. I protect what belongs to me. The possessive statement might have bothered him once. Now, it felt oddly reassuring. Distributing flyers proved straightforward. Issei moved through the residential neighborhoods efficiently, slipping the magical advertisements under doors and into mailboxes. As he worked, he practiced extending his senses as Akeno had taught him. Feeling the subtle energies of the human world. Near midnight, as he placed the last flyer, one of the earlier ones activated. A pull of magic tugged at his awareness, someone had summoned him. Following the sensation, Issei found himself transported to a small apartment across town. A middle-aged man in rumpled business attire looked startled as Issei materialized in his living room. It actually worked. I thought my colleague was joking about these devil summoning flyers. Issei bowed professionally. Good evening, sir. I'm here to fulfill your wish, within reasonable parameters of course. The man ran a hand through thinning hair. Well, this is awkward. I have an important presentation tomorrow, but my computer crashed, and I've lost the final version of my files. I was desperate enough to try anything. Relieved by the simplicity of the request, Issei approached the man's laptop. May I? As he worked to recover the lost files, Issei felt the shadows in the darkened apartment responding to his presence, curling around his fingers as he typed. Rather than fight the sensation, he experimented with directing them, using the darkness to extend his awareness into the machine's components. To his surprise, he could sense the data still present on the storage drive, merely disconnected from the file system. The shadows seemed to interface with the electronic information, allowing him to visualize and reconstruct the broken links. There, he said after 20 minutes of work. Your presentation is restored, along with the rest of your documents. I've also reinforced your system to prevent similar crashes. The man stared in amazement at the recovered files. That's incredible. The IT department at work said it was hopeless without sending the drive to a specialized recovery service. Issei smiled modestly. Sometimes fresh eyes see solutions others miss. He pulled out a contract form Rias had provided. For payment, would a home-cooked meal be acceptable? I sense you're an excellent cook who rarely gets to share your talent. The man looked surprised, then pleased. Yes, I used to be a sous chef before corporate life. How did you know? Issei hadn't known consciously. The information had simply appeared in his mind when the shadows touched the man's possessions, carrying impressions of their owner's past. Devil intuition, he replied with a wink. As the payment acceptable, the man agreed enthusiastically, preparing a late-night meal that they shared over pleasant conversation. When Issei finally left with a signed contract, he felt oddly satisfied with the simple exchange of services. On his way home, a prickling sensation at the base of his skull warned him of danger moments before a light spear embedded itself in the sidewalk where he'd been standing. His enhanced devil reflexes had allowed him to dodge instinctively. Impressive movement for a newborn, came a male voice from above. Rainer said you died easily. But it seems you've been upgraded since then. A fallen angel hovered above the street, his 4 black wings spread imposingly against the night sky. Unlike Rainer's revealing outfit, this angel wore a fedora and trench coat that might have looked ridiculous if not for the deadly light spear he twirled casually in one hand. I have no quarrel with the fallen, Issei stated calmly, assessing his options. He could activate the communication circle, but part of him wanted to test his new abilities against this threat. The fallen angel laughed. How diplomatic. Unfortunately, my orders are clear. Any devil from the House of Gremory spotted alone is to be eliminated. He hurled another light spear, this one moving faster than the first. Issei raised his left arm, the boosted gear materializing instantly. Boost, Diedrag's voice announced as the jewel flashed. Issei felt his strength double, his movements becoming more fluid as he evaded the attack. The fall, an angel frowned and created 2 spears simultaneously, launching them from different angles. Dodging both would be impossible. Acting on instinct, Issei reached for the shadows cast by a nearby streetlight. They responded eagerly, surging upward to form a shield that intercepted one spear while he physically dodged the other. The fallen angel froze in midair, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion. What was that? Devils don't control shadows like that. Issei didn't waste the moment of surprise. Boost, the gauntlet announced again, further doubling his power. With his enhanced strength, Issei leapt upward, crossing the distance between them faster than the fallen angel could react. The boosted gear connected solidly with his opponent's jaw, sending him crashing into a parked car below. That's for Rainer's welcome gift, Issei said coldly as he landed gracefully on the sidewalk. The fallen angel struggled to his feet, blood trickling from his mouth. You're no ordinary devil, he spat. What are you? Instead of answering, Issei reached for the shadows again. This time, he shaped them into tendrils that shot forward, wrapping around the fallen angel's wings and limbs. The darkness seemed eager, almost hungry as it bound his opponent. Wait, the fallen angel cried, genuine fear replacing his earlier arrogance. This power, it can't be. The void arts were sealed. Issei approached slowly, the shadows responding to his proximity by tightening their grip. Tell me who sent you, and I might let you live. Kokobile, the fallen angel gasped through his constricted chest. He's planning something big, wants the Gremory girl out of the way. That's all I know, I swear. Issei considered the information, weighing its likely truthfulness against the risk of releasing his captive. Before he could decide, the communication circle in his pocket activated on its own. Rias appeared in a flash of crimson light, taking in the scene with a quick glance. I sensed your sacred gear activating multiple times, she explained, then noticed the restrained fallen angel. I see you handled things quite effectively. The fallen angel's eyes widened at her appearance. Crimson-haired ruined princess, he hissed. Your brother won't be able to protect you when Kokobile moves. Rias raised an elegant eyebrow. As that's so, perhaps you'd like to elaborate on that statement. When the fallen angel remained stubbornly silent, Issei tightened the shadow bindings slightly. He mentioned someone named Kokobile planning something that requires you to be eliminated. Kokobile. Rias looked troubled. A Cadre class fallen angel, one of their leaders. She studied their captive thoughtfully. This complicates matters. She turned to Issei. As impressive as your restraint technique is, we should probably release him with a warning. Killing a fallen angel, even in self-defense, could have political ramifications we're not prepared to deal with yet. Issei nodded, understanding the logic even as part of him wanted to eliminate the threat permanently. He released the shadow bindings, which receded reluctantly, leaving the fallen angel gasping on the ground. Rias addressed their defeated opponent. Return to Kokobile with a message. The House of Gremory is not to be trifled with. Any further aggression will be met with appropriate force. The fallen angel staggered to his feet, wings dragging slightly as he prepared to depart. This isn't over, he warned, glaring particularly at Issei. Especially for you, Shadow Wielder. There are those who remember what that power did in the ancient wars. With that ominous statement, he launched himself skyward and disappeared into the night. Rias turned to Issei, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. You handled yourself exceptionally well for your first confrontation as a devil. It felt natural, Issei admitted. Both the boosted gear and the shadows responded almost without conscious thought. That's both impressive and somewhat concerning. Rias began walking, indicating for him to join her. The ease with which you're adapting suggests these abilities might be reawakening rather than developing fresh. They walked in companionable silence for a few minutes before Rias spoke again. The fallen angel's reaction to your shadow powers troubles me. If these are truly the legendary void arts returning, we may face opposition from all three factions. Why would they fear these powers so much? Issei asked. Rias sighed. The little information I've ND suggests the void arts could manipulate the boundaries between dimensions, potentially threatening the very foundations of reality if misused. Issei absorbed this sobering information. And they think I might misuse them. They might fear that anyone with such power could become a threat. Rias stopped walking and faced him directly. Which means we need to understand what you're capable of as quickly as possible. To prepare for whatever comes next. Their eyes met in the dim streetlight, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Whatever was happening to Issei, whatever was awakening within him, would change both their lives irrevocably. I have another contract waiting, Rias said finally, breaking the silence. Can you make it home safely, or would you prefer I accompany you? I'll be fine, Issei assured her. I think I've learned not to underestimate our opponents. Rias nodded, though concern lingered in her eyes. Use the communication circle immediately if anything happens. She hesitated, then added, and Issei, thank you for defending my house's honor tonight. It means a great deal to me. With that, she vanished in a flash of crimson light, leaving Issei alone with his thoughts and the shadows that seemed increasingly like companions rather than mere phenomena. That night, his dreams were clearer than ever before. The shadowy figure atop the megalith turned toward him. Its features still obscured but its voice resonant and familiar. At last you begin to remember, Inheritor, it intoned. The forgotten arts stir within you, but beware. With remembrance comes responsibility. The shadows serve, but they also hunger. The void gives, but it also takes. The figure extended a hand wreathed in darkness. Come, it is time you learn. What it truly means to be the Sage of Shadows. Issei reached for that outstretched hand, and as their fingers touched, knowledge flooded his mind. Symbols, incantations, techniques for manipulating the very fabric of darkness itself. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to contain an ocean in a teacup. He woke with a gasp, sweat-soaked sheets tangled around him. The digital clock read 3:17 a.m. Precisely the same time he always woke from these dreams. But something had changed. The shadows in his room weren't just responding to his presence now. They were actively reaching for him, caressing his skin like affectionate pets. And on the ceiling above his bed, written in what looked like liquid darkness, was a phrase in an ancient script he somehow understood perfectly. The sage returns when shadows and light once again stand in balance. Prepare, Inheritor. They will come for you now. As if confirming this warning, Issei's phone chimed with a text message. Despite the early hour, Rias was awake and succinct. Emergency meeting, 5 a.m. We have visitors from the underworld. They know about you. Issei stared at the message, then at the shadowy writing on his ceiling. What ever normal life he might have had was clearly over. In its place was something ancient, dangerous, and inexplicably familiar, as if he were remembering a role he'd played before. I accept, he said to the empty room. And the shadows pulsed in approval. Chapter 1 End Chapter 2, Echoes of Ancient Power. Dawn painted Kuo Academy's old school building in hues of amber and gold, the early morning. G-light filtering through Victorian windows to cast long shadows across polished wooden floors. These shadows seemed to pulse with subtle awareness, stretching toward Issei as he entered the Occult Research Club's meeting room. Responding to his presence like iron filings to a magnet, Rias Gremory stood by the ornate desk that dominated one end of the room, her crimson hair cascading down her back like liquid fire. Beside her stood a silver-haired woman in an elaborate maid uniform whose posture and aura radiated authority that transcended her domestic appearance. Issei, thank you for coming so early, Rias greeted, tension evident beneath her composed exterior. This is Graphia Lucifuge, queen to my brother Searzex Lucifer and the strongest queen in the underworld. The silver-haired woman inclined her head slightly, her piercing gray eyes assessing Issei with clinical precision. So this is the shadow wielder, she remarked, her voice cultured and cool. Unexpected, to find such power in a newly reincarnated devil. Rather than the nervous deference he might have shown before his transformation, Issei met her gaze steadily. I'm still learning what these abilities mean myself, Lucifuge-sama. Indeed. Graphia circled him slowly, her movements deliberate. The void arts haven't been witnessed in millennia. Some believed them extinct, others sealed beyond recovery. Yet here you stand, channeling shadows with untrained ease. What exactly are the void arts? Issei questioned, directing his inquiry to both women. Everyone reacts to them with either fear or fascination. But no one seems able to explain what they actually are. Rias exchanged a glance with Graphia, who nodded almost imperceptibly before responding. The void arts predate the three factions, Graphia explained, her tone shifting to that of a historian. Before angels, fallen, or devils established dominance, there existed practitioners who drew power from the dimensional boundaries, the spaces between realities. They were known by many names across different cultures, but most commonly as the Sages of Shadow. She gestured, and a magic circle appeared in the air, projecting images of ANC. And texts and symbols Issei recognized from his dreams. These sages could manipulate darkness itself, bend shadows to physical form, and, most concerning to the established powers, create pathways between dimensions that bypassed all conventional barriers. When the Great War erupted, the sages remained neutral initially, but their power made them coveted allies. Rias continued the history lesson, her academic knowledge complementing Graphia's first-hand perspective. According to Devil records, the last known Sage of Shadows vanished during the final battles of the Great War. Some accounts claim he sacrificed himself to seal away a catastrophic weapon. Others suggest he was assassinated by a coalition of all three factions who feared his growing power. And now some believe his powers have reawakened in you. Graphia concluded, her expression unreadable. Which brings us to the purpose of my visit. The four Satans request your presence in the underworld for evaluation and, potentially, training. Issei absorbed this information with outward calm, though internally his mind raced. The dreams, the shadowy figure, the increasing ease with which he manipulated darkness, the pieces were fitting together with unsettling precision. This isn't a request I can refuse, is it? He asked, already knowing the answer. Graphia's lips curved in the ghost of a smile. Perceptive. While technically voluntary, your refusal would be politically problematic for Lady Rias. Rias stepped forward, her protective instincts evident. Issei remains under my authority as a member of my peerage. Any evaluation must recognize that fundamental relationship. The subtle power play between the women didn't escape Issei's notice. Rias was establishing boundaries while acknowledging the reality of their situation. She couldn't directly oppose her brother or the devil government, but she would not surrender her authority entirely. When would this evaluation take place? Issei inquired, his voice steady despite the implications. After the matter with House Phoenix is resolved, Graphia replied, causing Rias to stiffen visibly. Which brings us to the second purpose of my visit. The Temperature in the room dropped several degrees as frost crystallized along the edges of Graphia's clothing, a physical manifestation of her displeasure. Lady Rias, your attempt to break your engagement through unauthorized raiding games has been noted. Lord Riser will arrive shortly to discuss terms for an official match. Rias's composure fractured momentarily, frustration bleeding through her aristocratic facade. My personal freedom isn't negotiable, Graphia. I won't be bartered away for political advantage, regardless of family expectations. Issei observed this exchange with growing understanding. Rias's situation mirrored aspects of feudal arrangements he'd studied in history, noble daughters used as political currency to cement alliances between powerful families. The parallel struck a chord of recognition deeper than academic knowledge, as though he'd witnessed similar scenarios countless times before. What abilities would this riser bring to a raiding game? Issei asked, erupting the tense silence between the women. Both turned to him with slightly surprised expressions, apparently having momentarily forgotten his presence. Riser Phoenix possesses the immortality of his house. Graphia explained after a moment. Phoenix regeneration makes him virtually unkillable through conventional means. Combined with his experience in raiding games and complete peerage, he presents a formidable challenge. Issei nodded thoughtfully. Immortality suggests a reliance on regeneration rather than avoidance. Interesting. Something in his analytical tone caused Rias to study him with renewed curiosity. Are you considering strategy against him already? Before Issei could respond, a massive magic circle flared to life in the center of the room, its flames illuminating the space with harsh orange light. From within stepped a tall, blond man in an expensive burgundy suit, his expression one of entitled confidence. My lovely Rias, the newcomer greeted, his tone possessive. Your brother suggested I might find you difficult, but sending the strongest queen seems excessive for a simple matrimonial discussion. The rest of the occult research club materialized through their own transportation circles. Clearly summoned by Rias through some silent communication. Akino, Kiba, and Kaneko positioned themselves protectively near their king, their stances subtly combat-ready. Riser Phoenix surveyed the assembled group with dismissive amusement until his gaze fell on Issei. His expression shifted, confidence giving way to wary assessment as he sensed something unexpected. You've acquired a new piece, he observed, addressing Rias while continuing to study Issei. One with an unusual aura. Issei Hyodo, my pawn, Rias confirmed, a hint of pride entering her voice. Riser circled Issei much as Graphia had earlier, though his examination held none of her clinical detachment. His eyes narrowed as shadows on the floor seemed to bend toward Issei, responding to the devil's scrutiny with almost sentient defensiveness. A Longinus wielder, Riser noted, recognizing the dormant power of the boosted gear. But there's something else. He reached toward Issei, hand wreathed in phoenix flame. The shadows moved without conscious command from Issei, rising between them like a barrier. Riser jerked back, flames extinguishing in surprise. Void manipulation, he breathed. Recognition and something like fear flickering across his features before his arrogant mask reasserted itself. How fascinating that House Gremory should discover such a rarity. He might almost suspect deliberate timing. Graphia intervened before the tension could escalate further. Lord Phoenix, your concerns about Lady Rias's peerage composition are noted but irrelevant to the matter at hand. The terms proposed by Sears Lucifer are simple, a rating game to determine whether the engagement stands or falls. Riser recovered his composure with visible effort. A rating game against an incomplete, inexperienced peerage, hardly sporting. His gaze lingered on Issei. Though perhaps not as imbalanced as I initially thought. If you're concerned about fairness, Issei suggested, his voice carrying a quiet authority that seemed to emanate from somewhere beyond his 17 years, perhaps additional stakes would make the contest more interesting. All eyes turned to him, expressions ranging from surprise to curiosity. What stakes did you have in mind, pawn? Riser inquired, amusement warring with genuine interest. Issei met the Phoenix heir's gaze directly. If Rias wins, the engagement ends permanently with no possibility of renewal or alternative arrangement. If you win, I offer 1,000 years of service to House Phoenix, specifically, researching the compatibility of void arts with phoenix flames. A stunned silence followed this proposal. Rias looked horrified, while Riser's expression shifted to calculating avarice. Issei, No, Rias protested. I won't allow you to gamble your freedom for mine. A millennium of exclusive access to rediscovered void arts, Riser mused, ignoring Rias's objection. Potentially revolutionary for our house's combat applications. He extended his hand toward Issei. I accept your terms, Pawn of Gremory. Before their hands could meet, Grafia stepped between them. Such an arrangement requires formal documentation and approval from multiple authorities, she stated, her tone brooking no argument. The basic terms of the rating game stand as proposed by Lord Lucifer. Any additional arrangements must proceed through proper channels. Riser withdrew his hand with obvious reluctance. Always the stickler for protocol, strongest queen. He turned to Rias with a theatrical bow. 10 days of preparation, my dear fiancé. Make them count. It will be your last act of defiance before becoming Lady Phoenix. With that parting shot, he disappeared in a swirl of flames, leaving behind only the lingering scent of smoke and wounded pride. The moment he vanished, Rias rounded on Issei. What were you thinking? Offering yourself as a research subject to the Phoenix family. Rather than defensive, Issei appeared calculating. He revealed 2 critical weaknesses in under 5 minutes of conversation: avarice and overconfidence. His immediate acceptance of impossible terms without consulting his family demonstrates both. Akino's eyes widened slightly. You were probing his psychological vulnerabilities. Someone willing to bargain away 1,000 years of another's life without hesitation. Will make similarly impulsive decisions in combat, Issei explained, his analytical assessment belying his limited experience. His reaction to the shadows was equally informative: recognition, then fear, then calculated greed. House Phoenix has encountered void arts before. Grafia observed this exchange with newfound interest. Your tactical assessment is surprisingly sophisticated for a newly reincarnated devil, Hyodo-san. Kiba nodded agreement. That didn't sound like the Issei from our school. Something shifted in Issei's expression, a momentary disorientation, as though he'd momentarily forgotten himself. I'm not sure where that came from, he admitted, genuine confusion replacing his previous confidence. The words just appeared in my mind. Rias exchanged a significant glance with Grafia. The ancestral memories are surfacing more rapidly than anticipated. Ancestral memories? Issei questioned. Grafia dismissed her projected images with a gesture. The evaluation in the underworld will have to wait. Preparing for this rating game takes precedence. She turned to Rias. I'll inform Lord Lucifer of these developments. In the meantime, I suggest intensive training focused on team coordination and maximizing your pawn's unique abilities. With that practical advice, she disappeared in a flash of silvery light, leaving the Occult Research Club to contemplate their approaching challenge. Rias wasted no time. We have 10 days to prepare for the most important battle of our lives. Akino, contact Sona. We'll need access to her family's training dimension. Kiba, Kaneko, assess our current combat readiness and identify priority improvement areas. Issei, her voice softened slightly. We need to understand what's happening with your abilities. As the others dispersed to their assigned tasks, Rias led Issei to a sealed room below the club building, a circular chamber whose walls were inscribed with protective wards and magical sensors. This space is designed for safely testing unknown abilities, she explained, activating a complex magic circle that illuminated the floor with azure light. The barriers contain power surges while the sensors record magical signatures for analysis. Issei stepped into the center of the circle, immediately aware of the shadows behaving differently within the warded space, more sluggish, as though moving through viscous liquid rather than air. The wards are suppressing them, he observed. Rias nodded, her expression serious. A necessary precaution. What I'm about to ask may accelerate whatever process is occurring within you. If these truly are the memories and powers of an ancient sage returning, we need to understand how they manifest and how you can control them. She positioned herself at the edge of the circle, hands poised to modify the containment field if necessary. I want you to close your eyes and actively seek the presence you've felt in your dreams, the entity you believe might be the original sage. Issei complied, closing his eyes and turning his awareness inward. Initially, he encountered only the expected landscape of his own consciousness, recent memories, emotional responses. The rhythmic patterns of thought that constituted his identity. But as he pushed deeper, he discovered a boundary, not a wall but a permeable membrane separating his familiar self from something vast and ancient. I can sense someone else, he reported, voice distant as his focus remained internal. Not like Diedrag's presence in the sacred gear. This feels like remembering myself, but a different self. Try to establish communication, Rias instructed, her voice steady despite the tension evident in her posture. Issei reached mentally toward the presence, projecting curiosity rather than fear. Who are you? The response came not in words but in impressions, ancient cities viewed from impossible heights, civilizations rising and falling like waves upon shores of time, no. WL edge accumulated across centuries of observation and intervention. Then, gradually, these kaleidoscopic images resolved into coherent thought. I am you, as you were. As you will be again. The shadows in the room responded to this internal exchange, coalescing into a translucent figure standing behind Issei, a tall, robed silhouette with features obscured by darkness. Rias gasped but maintained her position, adjusting the containment field to accommodate this manifestation. Can you hear me? She addressed the shadow directly. The figure turned toward her, assessing her with unseen eyes. When it spoke, the voice emerged from Issei's mouth, though the timbre and cadence differed from his natural speech, deeper, measured, carrying the weight of ages. Daughter of Gremory, your line was merely ascending when last I walked these realms. The ancient voice sounded contemplative. The world has changed much, yet the patterns remain familiar. Power still breeds conflict, and conflict still breeds opportunity. Rias maintained her composure admirably despite the otherworldly conversation. Are you the original Sage of Shadows? A sound like distant laughter emanated from the shadowy figure. Original? No, I was but one link in a chain stretching back to the primordial darkness. The title passes, but the essence remains constant. The figure circled Issei, examining him as one might appraise a reflection. This vessel shows promise. The dragon's presence is unexpected but potentially complementary. The boundaries between us thin with each awakening. Is Issei in danger from this process? Rias demanded, protective instinct evident in her voice. Danger implies unwelcome change, the sage replied enigmatically. He becomes what he always had the potential to be, what circumstances now require him to be. The mergence is natural, inevitable. Inside his mindscape, Issei addressed the presence directly. You're talking about me like I'm just a container for your resurrection. The internal response carried a surprising warmth. Not resurrection, continuity. I am not replacing you, inheritor. We are becoming a synthesis, your modern perspective with my accumulated knowledge. Your experiences with my techniques. Your heart with my purpose. The shadow figure extended a hand toward Rias, though it maintained its distance from the barrier edge. You care for this vessel, Gremory daughter. Good. He will need anchors to his present life as past knowledge surfaces. Rias stepped forward, her expression resolute. Issei is my pawn, my responsibility. If this merger threatens him, I will find a way to stop it. Such loyalty, the sage observed, sounding pleased. It mirrors what I once inspired in my circle. The shadowy form began to dissipate, its voice growing fainter. The containment field drains my manifestation. Remember this, Crimson Princess, the void arts are neither good nor evil, but like all power, they reflect the intentions of their wielder. Guide him well. With these parting words, the figure collapsed into ordinary shadows that flowed back to their natural positions in the room. Issei's eyes opened, their brown depths momentarily overlaid with silver before returning to normal. That was, he began, struggling to articulate the experience. Extraordinary, Rias completed for him, deactivating the containment field. And concerning, this isn't simple memory inheritance, the original sage's consciousness appears partially intact within you. Issei nodded, processing this confirmation of what he'd already suspected. It doesn't feel hostile, more like a mentor eager to pass on knowledge before fading away. Even benevolent possession remains possession, Rias countered, her academic knowledge asserting itself. We need to establish safeguards. Ensure you maintain control of the integration process. She approached him, hesitating briefly before placing her hand against his cheek in a gesture that transcended their formal relationship. Promise me something, Issei. If you ever feel yourself slipping away, your modern self being subsumed by these ancient memories, tell me immediately. I won't lose you to some millennia-old consciousness. No matter how powerful or knowledgeable. The genuine concern in her eyes affected Issei deeply. In his previous life, few people had valued him enough to fight for his identity this way. I promise, he replied simply, covering her hand with his own. A moment of connection passed between them, interrupted when Akeno entered the training room. Preparations are complete, she announced, eyes flickering between them with knowing amusement. Sona has granted us access to the C-Tree training dimension for 9 days, beginning tomorrow morning. Rias withdrew her hand with practiced composure. Excellent. We'll depart at dawn. Everyone should pack for extended, intensive training. As Akeno and Rias discussed logistical details, Issei felt the sage's presence stirring within his mind. More integrated now after their direct communication. She has strength beyond her years, the ancient consciousness observed. Her magical potential exceeds most of her generation. Is that professional assessment or personal appreciation? Issei inquired internally, noting the admiration in the sage's tone. A ripple of amusement answered him. Perhaps both. In my era, such combination of power, intellect, and striking appearance would have inspired epic poetry. She's also my king. Issei reminded the presence, surprised by his own possessive reaction. Indeed, a fortunate alignment of circumstances. The sage's presence receded slightly. Rest tonight, inheritor. Tomorrow begins your true education in the void arts. The training dimension existed in A.P. Occult realm between the human world and the underworld proper, a space where time flowed differently, allowing 9 days of training to be compressed into what would feel like months of intensive work. The landscape featured varied terrains for specialized practice, mountains for endurance, forests for stealth, open plains for large-scale combat simulations, and a central compound with living quarters and academic facilities. Sona C-Tree, Rias's friend and rival, had provided access to this family resource despite the political implications of assisting in a challenge against an established engagement. Your first priority, Rias announced to her assembled peerage, is mastering your individual abilities. Kiba will focus on sword speed and variety of demonic blade manifestations. Kaneko will work on strength regulation and defensive techniques. Akeno will refine her lightning precision and develop secondary elemental affinities. She turned to Issei. You have the most complex training. regimen, integrating your sacred gear with these emerging shadow abilities while building your basic devil skills. The schedule she outlined was grueling. Mornings devoted to physical conditioning. Afternoons to magical theory and practical application, evenings to team combat simulations. Every moment was optimized for development, with only brief periods allocated for rest and recovery. For Issei, training began with fundamentals, understanding the magical energy that powered devil abilities, learning to circulate and direct it efficiently through his reincarnated body. Akeno served as his primary instructor for these basics, her teaching style combining technical precision with sadistic enjoyment of his struggles. Magical energy responds to clear intent and emotional focus, she explained during their first session, demonstrating by creating a perfect sphere of lightning between her palms. Devils typically channel emotion into their magic: anger, pride, desire. Find what works for you. Issei attempted to replicate her exercise, producing only feeble sparks that dissipated almost immediately. Frustration mounted with each failure until the sage's presence stirred within him. Traditional devil methods won't serve you optimally, the ancient consciousness advised. The void arts require different pathways. Following this internal guidance, Issei shifted his approach. Rather than pushing energy outward as Akeno demonstrated, he drew ambient darkness toward himself, compressing it between his palms. The shadows responded eagerly, coalescing into a perfect sphere of deepest black that absorbed surrounding light. Akeno's eyes widened appreciatively. That's not devil magic at all. It feels more natural, Issei explained, examining the shadow sphere with fascination. Like the energy wants to be shaped this way. The void art's function as inversion of conventional magic, Akeno noted, her scholarly knowledge supplementing her practical experience. Instead of projecting power outward, you're creating vacuums that reality rushes to fill. Fascinating but potentially dangerous, Be careful not to create pulls you can't control. This pattern repeated throughout his training. Conventional techniques would prove difficult until the sage's knowledge provided alternative approaches that yielded immediate results. For combat movement, instead of he teleportation circles devils typically used, Issei learned to step between shadows, passing momentarily through a cold dimension of absolute darkness before emerging elsewhere. Kiba, tasked with helping develop Issei's close combat skills, found himself facing an increasingly unpredictable opponent. What began as basic swordplay instruction evolved into sophisticated duels as Issei's fighting style incorporated shadow manipulation with growing fluidity. "You're creating phantom blades," Kiba observed during their 7th training day, defending against attacks from both Issei's physical word and shadowy duplicates that emerged from the ground at unexpected angles. "They're not solid enough to cause serious damage yet, but the distraction value is significant." Issei nodded, experimenting with the technique. "They respond to my intentions but lack substance. I need to find the balance between flexibility and impact." Kaneko contributed to his training through merciless physical conditioning, her rook strength making her an ideal sparring partner for endurance development. Her taciturn nature gave way to occasional tactical insights delivered in her characteristic blunt manner. "Your shadows move before you do," she noted during a particularly grueling session. "Telegraphs your attacks. Control them better." Each evening, after the scheduled training concluded, Issei would retreat to a secluded grove to work directly with the sage's consciousness. These private sessions focused on the philosophical underpinnings of the void arts rather than just their practical applications. "Shadow is not merely absence of light," the ancient presence lectured. "It is the boundary between dimensions, the veil separating realities. What appears as manipulation of darkness is actually negotiation with the spaces between worlds." These esoteric lessons occurred in meditative states where Issei's consciousness merged more completely with the sage's memories. He experienced firsthand how the original practitioners had discovered these techniques, ancient humans noticing how shadows sometimes behaved contrary to physical laws, investigating these anomalies until they found ways to communicate with the void itself. On the 5th night of these private sessions, Rias discovered his secluded practice. Rather than interrupting, she observed silently as Issei sat in meditation. Shadows spiraling around him in complex patterns that occasionally opened windows into other places, brief glimpses of landscapes not of Earth, architectures impossible under human physics. "How much of that is Issei? And how much is the ancient sage?" she asked when he finally opened his eyes, aware of her presence. Issei considered the question thoughtfully. "The line blurs more each day. Techniques come from the sage's knowledge, but the applications feel like my own choices." Rias seated herself beside him on the stone where he meditated. "Show me something uniquely yours, an application of these void arts that wouldn't have occurred to your predecessor." The request intrigued both Issei and the sage's consciousness. After a moment's consideration, he extended his hand toward the deepest shadows beneath a nearby tree. From this darkness emerged what appeared to be a miniature recreation of Kuo Academy, perfectly detailed and composed entirely of living shadow. "I've been experimenting with creating physical models from memory," he explained as the shadow school rotated above his palm. The sage used shadows primarily for combat and transportation. "I've been wondering about architectural and artistic applications." The display shifted, becoming the occult research club room in perfect detail, right down to the antique furniture and chess set permanently positioned by the window. Within this shadowscape, tiny figures moved, representations of club members engaged in everyday activities. Rias watched with undisguised wonder. "It's beautiful," she murmured, reaching out to touch the miniature version of herself seated at the desk. The shadow figure responded to her touch, turning to acknowledge her with a tiny bow. "They're semi-autonomous," Issei explained. "I set general parameters, but they develop their own patterns based on my memories of how everyone behaves." Something in Rias's expression shifted as she observed this peaceful scene, a momentary vulnerability revealing the pressure she carried. "When I'm not being the Gremory heir, the club president, or someone's unwilling fiancé," she said softly, "this is what I want, simple moments with people who matter to me." The uncharacteristic candor surprised Issei. Rias typically maintained careful boundaries between her role as his king and any personal feelings. This glimpse beneath her composed exterior felt significant. A trust he hadn't earned through mere peerage bonds. "Is that why you're fighting the engagement so hard?" he asked. "To protect those moments." Rias watched the shadow figures for several seconds before responding. "Partly. The political marriage would require relocating to Fennec's territory, abandoning my education, my club, my independence. But more fundamentally," she hesitated, searching for words, "I refuse to surrender my right to choose my own future. My own heart." Her gaze lifted from the shadow model to meet his directly. "When I eventually marry, it will be to someone who sees me as Rias first and Gremory second. Someone who values my mind and spirit above my bloodline or appearance." The intensity in her eyes created a moment of connectio, and that transcended their formal relationship. Issei felt the sage's consciousness stir with recognition of something timeless, the universal desire for genuine understanding rather than superficial appreciation. "We'll win this rating game," Issei stated with quiet certainty. "Not just for your freedom, but for what that freedom represents." Rias smiled, the expression transforming her from regal heiress to simply a young woman with hopes and fears like any other. "Such confidence from my newest pawn." "Not confidence, determination," Issei corrected gently. "There's a difference." She reached out, her fingers brushing his cheek in a gesture reminiscent of their moment in the training room. "Yes, there is, and I'm beginning to understand that difference in you, Issei Hyodo." The shadow W model dissolved as Issei's concentration shifted, the darkness returning to natural patterns around them. Something had changed between them, a boundary crossed, a formality set aside. Neither acknowledged it verbally, but both recognized its significance. "We should return to the compound," Rias suggested eventually. "Tomorrow's training begins early." As they walked back together through the moonlit training grounds, Issei felt the sage's presence, observing with something like approval. "She sees beyond the vessel to the essence," the ancient consciousness noted. "Rare in one so young, particularly among nobility." "She's exceptional in many ways," Issei agreed, surprised by how naturally he now conversed with this other self. "The Fennec's heir doesn't perceive her true value," the sage continued. "His defeat must be absolute, leaving no political avenue for the engagement to be reinstated." Agreed. "But Riser's regeneration makes conventional victory nearly impossible." Say of ancient amusement filtered through their shared consciousness. "Then perhaps unconventional methods are required. The void arts were sealed precisely because they circumvent such natural advantages." The final days of training focused increasingly on team coordination, with Rias developing strategies that maximized each member's strengths while accounting for their limitations. Kiba's speed made him ideal for initial engagement and disruption. Kaniko's durability positioned her as both defender and heavy striker. Akino's versatile magic provided ranged support and area control. For Issei, Rias envisioned a specialized role that combined the boosted gear's power multiplication with his evolving shadow abilities. "Traditional rating games follow predictable patterns," she explained during their strategic planning session. "Fennec's will expect conventional tactics, direct confrontation leading to war of attrition that favors his regeneration. We'll present exactly that appearance initially." Her slender finger traced patterns across the tactical map. "Kiba and Kaniko will engage their forward elements here and here, creating the impression of a standard opening. Akino will provide typical support. Nothing that suggests unusual capability. Meanwhile," Issei continued, following her thinking, "I remain in reserve, accumulating boosts while hidden in shadow form." Rias nodded, pleased by his grasp of the strategy. "Precisely. Riser knows about both your sacred gear and shadow abilities, but not how they might combine. That's our ace." The theoretical combination had emerged during an experimental session with Akino. They discovered that the boosted gear's power doubling affected not just Issei's physical capabilities but the potency of his shadow manipulation as well. With sufficient boosts, his control over darkness reached unprecedented levels, creating solid constructs, opening larger dimensional pathways, even temporarily suppressing other magical effects within shadow-covered areas. "The key question," Akino noted during this planning session, "is whether shadow manipulation can interfere with Phoenix regeneration. Theoretically, Regeneration require S-dimensional access to draw matter for reconstruction. If the void arts truly affect dimensional boundaries, we might be able to temporarily suppress or redirect his healing, Issei completed the thought. Not permanently, that would require more complete mastery than I currently possess, but perhaps long enough to force submission. The strategy crystallized around this central possibility. Every team member would play their role in maneuvering Riser into position for Issei's decisive strike, a concentrated shadow attack enhanced by accumulated boosts, targeting not Riser's physical form, but the dimensional pathways his regeneration relied upon. On their final evening in the training dimension, Rias gathered her peerage for a moment of reflection before returning to the human world. Whatever happens tomorrow, she addressed them, her expression solemn but determined, I want you to know how proud I am of each of you. This battle isn't just about my personal freedom, it's about our dignity as a peerage. Our right to determine our own path rather than submit to external expectations. Her gaze moved from face to face, lingering briefly on each member. Kiba, your loyalty and skill have never wavered. Kaneko, your strength provides our foundation. Akeno, your counsel and power have been my constant support. Finally, her eyes met Issei's. And you, my newest family member, have brought something unexpected and extraordinary to our circle. Whether we triumph or falter tomorrow, that gift has already changed us irrevocably. The simple sincerity of her words affected everyone differently. Kiba bowed formally, knight to sovereign. Kaneko simply nodded, though her typically expressionless face softened slightly. Akeno's eyes glistened with uncharacteristic emotion. For Issei, the moment crystallized something he'd been feeling throughout their training, a sense of belonging he'd never experienced before. His previous life had been ordinary to the point of invisibility, his friendships superficial, his purpose undefined. Now he stood among extraordinary individuals, valued not just for the ancient power awakening within him but for his own developing identity. We won't fail you, he promised. Speaking for all of them. The raiding game arena was constructed to resemble Kuo Academy, a psychological tactic from Riser, reminding Rias that her school life resented the freedom she would lose upon marriage. Both teams would begin at opposite ends of the campus, Rias in the old school building that housed the Occult Research Club, Riser in the student council offices across the grounds. As they prepared in their starting position, Rias made final adjustments to their strategy based on intelligence Graphia had discreetly provided about Riser's peerage composition. 15 pieces total, including Riser himself, she summarized. 8 pawns specialized for different combat roles, 2 knights with contrasting styles, 2 bishops with complementary magic, 2 rooks with heavy offensive capability, and his queen who combines multiple disciplines. Akeno whistled softly, a complete set, expertly balanced. He's been building this team for years. Quantity isn't quality, Kaneko stated flatly, adjusting her fighting gloves. Kiba nodded agreement, and experience isn't everything. Innovation often overcomes established patterns. Rias turned to Issei, who stood slightly apart, eyes closed in concentration as he communed with both Didraig and the sage's consciousness, preparing his dual power sources for coordinated deployment. Issei, are you ready? His eyes opened, brown irises momentarily overlaid with draconic green and ancient silver. As ready as possible. The sage has shared techniques for combining boosts with shadow manipulation, but warns they'll be taxing. I'll need to time the execution precisely. The announcement system activated, Graphia's formal voice declaring the commencement of the raiding game. A magical barrier descended over the replica campus, ensuring the battle remained contained while allowing spectators from Devil Society to observe through viewing portals. Remember, Rias addressed her team one final time. Appear conventional until the critical moment. Let Riser believe his experience grants him predictive advantage. The opening moves followed raiding game orthodoxy. Kiba advanced through the main school building, encountering and quickly dispatching 3 of Riser's pawns through superior speed and swordsmanship. Kaneko established a defensive perimeter around their base, intercepting and defeating a knight who attempted early infiltration. Akeno took to the skies, engaging Riser's queen in what appeared to be a standard magical duel, lightning against explosive fire magic. The choreographed nature of these encounters maintained the illusion of a traditional strategy while positioning key pieces for the real objective. Meanwhile, Issei moved unseen through the shadows, his presence masked by techniques the sage had taught him. With each circuit of the battlefield, he accumulated another boost from the sacred gear, storing power for the decisive strike while gathering Ceatical intelligence on Riser's movements and tendencies. 8 boosts accumulated, * the sage's consciousness noted. Approaching maximum sustainable level for your current development. **** Ddraig, ho, much longer can I maintain this power level? Issei inquired internally. The dragon's rumbling voice answered from the sacred gear. Perhaps 5 minutes at most before forcible deactivation. Make them count, partner. ***. Through shadow sight, a technique allowing him to perceive through any shadow on the battlefield, Issei observed Riser growing increasingly confident as the conventional battle progressed. Despite losing several pieces to Rias's team, the Phoenix heir advanced personally toward the old school building, clearly believing victory inevitable once he engaged Rias directly. He follows the expected pattern. Issei communicated to Rias through a shadow link they'd developed during training. Approaching your position with his queen and remaining bishop as support. Perfect. Came Rias's response. Akano is withdrawing strategically, appearing weakened. Kiba and Kaneko are converging for our planned defense. Take position for the intercept. The trap was set. As Riser entered the old school building, his posture radiated absolute confidence. His queen, Ubeluna, hovered outside to prevent escape while his bishop maintained defensive wards against potential counterattack. Rias, my dear, Riser called. His voice echoing through the hallways, there's no need to prolong this. Your team has fought admirably, but the outcome is inevitable. Surrender gracefully, and I'll ensure your peerage receives favorable treatment in House Phoenix. Inside the club room, Rias stood alone, her crimson hair contrasting dramatically with her white uniform. Her expression revealed nothing as she responded. I acknowledge your tactical advantage, Riser. But before discussing terms, I have a question. She stepped forward, power gathering around her hands in crimson waves. Do you ever wonder why I positioned my pieces as I did? Why my attacks followed such conventional patterns? Something in her tone gave Riser pause. His eyes narrowed slightly, the first flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. A novice follows established strategy. It's to be expected. Or perhaps, Rias suggested, a small smile forming, a strategist gives her opponent exactly what he expects to see. As comprehension dawned on Riser's face, the shadows behind him coalesced into Issei, the boosted gear gleaming on his left arm while his right hand extended toward the Phoenix heir, wreathed in void black energy. Transfer. Ddraig's voice boomed as Issei channeled 8 accumulated boosts not into physical attack but into the shadow manipulation technique the sage had prepared. Dimensional severance. Issei intoned, the words ancient and heavy with power. The shadow beneath Riser expanded instantly, engulfing him in darkness that wasn't merely absence of light but absence of dimension itself. Within this field, the connections between realities, the pathways that Phoenix regeneration relied upon to draw material for healing, were temporarily disrupted. Riser's scream was more surprise than pain as he found himself suspended in a bubble of non-space. His instinctive attempt to generate Phoenix flames produced only feeble sparks that died immediately, cut off from their dimensional source. Outside the building, Ubeluna sensed her king's distress and attempted to intervene, only to be intercepted by Akano, who had been conserving power for precisely this moment. Kiba and Kaneko simultaneously engaged the bishop, preventing any support from reaching Riser. Inside the dimensional severance field, Riser struggled futilely against constraints he'd never encountered before. What is this? He demanded, genuine fear replacing his habitual arrogance. Release me immediately. Rias approached the edge of the shadow field, her expression calm but resolute. Quote, surrender the match and renounce all claims to engagement, Riser Phoenix. Or discover exactly how the void arts earned their fearsome reputation. To emphasize her point, Issei contracted the field slightly. The boundaries of non-space pressed against Riser's form, creating sensation that wasn't precisely pain but something perhaps more disturbing, the experience of partial dimensional displacement. Of existing simultaneously in multiple states of reality. This is impossible, Riser gasped, his regeneration attempting to activate but finding no dimensional pathways to draw upon. Phoenix immortality cannot be negated. Not negated, Issei corrected, strain evident in his voice as he maintained the complex technique. Temporarily redirected, your regenerative energy is still functioning, but its pathways are being channeled elsewhere. He nodded toward the viewing portal where devil nobles were watching with astonishment. Your family can verify that this technique causes no permanent harm, merely temporary suspension of your natural advantage. Political implications dawned on Riser's face as he realized his position. Being defeated through superior strategy rather than brute foe. RCE offered a path to preserve dignity while acknowledging Rias's right to autonomy. Continuing resistance would only demonstrate petty desperation. He began, visibly struggling with pride. I concede the match and withdraw my claim to engagement with Rias Gremory. The formal declaration triggered the rating game's conclusion protocols. Graphia's voice announced, Lord Riser Phoenix has conceded. Victory belongs to Lady Rias Gremory and her peerage. As the dimensional severance field dissipated, Issei staggered slightly, the combined drain of maintaining boosts and executing complex void arts taking its toll. Rias moved to his side, supporting him with unexpected tenderness. You did it, she murmured, genuine gratitude in her voice. We did it, Issei corrected, including their entire team in the victory. Riser straightened his clothing with as much dignity as possible, his expression complex, wounded pride warring with reluctant respect. Unconventional tactics, he acknowledged stiffly. House Phoenix will honor the outcome. He turned to depart, then hesitated, looking back at Issei. The offer stands, Void Wielder. Should you ever wish to research the compatibility of your arts with Phoenix Flames, our house would compensate you generously, as a contractor, not a servant. Before Issei could respond, Rias interjected smoothly. Any such negotiations would naturally proceed through proper channels, with House Gremory's interests appropriately represented. The political parry was executed perfectly, acknowledging the potential value of collaboration while firmly establishing Issei's position within her protection. Riser recognized the maneuver with a tight smile that contained a hint of genuine amusement. As you say, Lady Rias, perhaps we might have made a formidable partnership after all. With that parting observation, he transported away in a swirl of Phoenix Flames. As the rating game barrier dissolved, returning them to the real Kuo Academy grounds. The full impact of their victory settled over Rias's peerage. They had defeated an established, experienced team against substantial odds, using innovation and strategic misdirection rather than raw power. Akeno, Kiba, and Kaneko joined them in the club room, various levels of exhaustion and satisfaction evident in their expressions. That, Akeno declared with uncharacteristic emphasis, was thoroughly satisfying. Kiba nodded agreement. Seeing Riser's face when he realized he'd been outmaneuvered was worth every minute of training. Even Kaneko allowed a small smile. Good plan. Better execution. Rias looked at her assembled peerage with undisguised pride. This victory belongs to all of us. Each of you performed your role perfectly. Her gaze lingered on Issei. Especially our newest member, whose unique abilities made the decisive strategy possible. Issei felt a complex mixture of emotions, satisfaction at their success, pride in his contribution, but also uncertainty about the implications of so publicly revealing the void arts. The rating game had been observed by high-ranking devils from multiple houses. Knowledge of his abilities would spread quickly through supernatural society. The sage's consciousness stirred within him, sharing similar concerns. Strategic victory, but tactical exposure. Preparations must accelerate now that our presence is confirmed. Asterisk. What happens next? Issei asked aloud, addressing both his internal companion and his king. Rias understood the layered question. Politically, my engagement is dissolved with no opportunity for reinstatement. House Phoenix will save face by emphasizing the innovative nature of their defeat rather than focusing on the loss itself. She moved to the window, gazing out at the academy ground. With newfound appreciation for the freedom they represented. For us, there will be increased attention from Devil Society, particularly regarding your abilities. The four Satans will likely expedite their evaluation request. And the fallen angels? Kiba inquired, recalling their earlier encounters. If Kokobile was already targeting us before, this public display of the void arts may accelerate his plans. We strengthen our defenses and remain vigilant, Rias decided. But first, she turned back to her team, a genuine smile transforming her serious expression. We celebrate our victory. Tonight is for us, politics and preparations can wait until tomorrow. The celebration unfolded at Rias's luxurious apartment, where she had arranged a feast worthy of their accomplishment. As our peerage relaxed into well-deserved revelry, Issei found himself drawn to the balcony, seeking momentary solitude to process the day's events and their implications. The night air carried the scent of approaching rain as he leaned against the railing, gazing at the city lights below. Inside, he could hear laughter and animated conversation as tensions released through shared joy. Not joining the festivities, Rias's voice came from behind him. Issei turned to find her standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the warm light from within. She had changed from her school uniform into a simple, crimson dress that complemented her hair and emphasized the elegant lines of her figure. Just taking a moment, he explained, making room for her at the railing. Processing everything, Rias joined him, her shoulder lightly touching his as they stood side by side. Today changed many things, she acknowledged. Your public demonstration of the void arts will have far-reaching consequences. I don't regret it, Issei stated firmly. Your freedom was worth whatever challenges come next. She turned slightly to study his profile. Why did you offer yourself to house Phoenix during that initial meeting? 1,000 years of service is no small commitment, even for a devil's lifespan. The question surprised him. With everything that had happened, he'd almost forgotten that impulsive proposal. It was partly tactical, as I explained later, but honestly, he hesitated, organizing thoughts that felt simultaneously his own and influenced by the sage's perspective. I couldn't stand the thought of you forced into a lifetime with someone who saw you as a political acquisition rather than a person. The simple honesty of his answer created a moment of silence between them. When Rias finally spoke, her voice carried unusual vulnerability. In Devil society, especially among high-ranking houses, personal considerations traditionally yield to political advantage. My parents' Maria, GE was arranged for bloodline compatibility and territorial alliance. They developed affection over centuries, but passion was never the foundation. She gazed out at the city lights, her expression pensive. I've always wanted something different, connection based on genuine understanding rather than convenience or appearance. Is that so unusual? Issei asked. Among devil nobility, increasingly common in younger generations, but still considered somewhat radical. A small smile touched her lips. My brother married for love despite enormous political pressure. He's something of a revolutionary in that regard. Lightning flashed in the distance, illuminating approaching storm clouds. Neither moved to return inside despite the impending rain. Thank you, Rias said suddenly, her voice soft but intense. Not just for today's victory, but for seeing me as Rias first and Gremory second. That perception is rarer than you might imagine. The genuine gratitude in her words affected Issei deeply. He started to formulate a response, but before he could speak, Rias closed the distance between them. Her lips met his in a kiss that began tentatively but quickly deepened with surprising intensity. The contact triggered something unexpected, a resonance between his awakening powers and her devil energy that manifested as crimson light intertwining with shadow tendrils around their embracing forms. The sensation was extraordinary, a connection transcending physical attraction to touch something essential in both their natures. When they finally separated, both were slightly breathless. Rias's eyes had widened in surprise at the magical manifestation their contact had produced. That was, she began. Unexpected, Issei completed, equally astonished by the phenomenon. The sage's consciousness stirred with interest. The crimson destruction energy of House Gremory harmonizes with void arts in ways I never explored. Fascinating potential. Asterisk. Raindrops began to fall, at first but quickly increasing as the storm reached them. Neither made any move to retreat from the weather, the cool water providing welcome contrast to the warmth between them. I should probably clarify, Rias said. Rain plastering crimson hair against her cheeks, that while gratitude motivated my thanks, it wasn't the primary emotion behind that kiss. Issei smiled, reaching out to brush wet strands from her face. I suspected as much, though I admit, the magical light show was a surprise. A research opportunity, she suggested, academic curiosity blending with personal interest in a way that was quintessentially Rias. We should probably investigate the phenomenon more thoroughly. For scholarly purposes, of course. Of course, Issei agreed with matching seriousness. Scientific rigor demands repeated observation under controlled conditions. Her laughter broke through the formal facade, bright and genuine. Perhaps later. For now, we should rejoin the others before they come looking for us. As they turned to head inside, Issei felt the sage's presence recede slightly, granting a moment of complete personal privacy, a thoughtful gesture from the ancient conscience that increasingly felt less like a separate entity and more like an aspect of himself. The celebration continued late into the night, a perfect interlude of happiness before the inevitable complications that awaited them. Tomorrow would bring political inquiries, supernatural interest, and the accelerated attention of forces that had been monitoring the Void Art's re-emergence. But tonight belonged to victory, to freedom chosen rather than conferred, and to connections formed through shared purpose rather than external arrangement. For Issei, who had lived an unremarkable existence until recently, the sense of belonging among these extraordinary individuals felt like its own form of power, one perhaps even more significant than the ancient abilities awakening within him. As the storm raged outside and warmth filled the apartment within, Issei caught Rias watching him across the room, her expression containing promises beyond their victory celebration. Whatever challenges approached on tomorrow's horizon, they would face them together, king and pawn, noble and commoner, ancient power and modern vessel united in purpose that transcended their formal roles. The sage's final thought, before receding completely into their shared consciousness, seemed to capture the moment perfectly. Power awakens most completely when wielded for something beyond oneself. Remember this truth, inheritor, for it will sustain you when mere technique falters. Chapter 2 end. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.